appreciate it. I want to bring in Joel Rubin, president of the Washington Strategy Group and a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. Joel, thanks for joining us on this. Really appreciate it. As I said to Kelly, just a stunning development here out of Israel with the change in government. We heard kind of Kelly tick through the TikTok of this whole thing over the last couple hours, just how close that vote was, 59 to 60. There's some of the analysis that I've been seeing on Netanyahu's speech. It seemed as if he knew what was coming in the way in which he delivered his speech, highlighting the best ofs, I should say, over the last 15 years, 12 consecutive, plus another 3 tacked on before that. But thinking about the government ahead, as Kelly mentioned, they've already gotten started. And I was speaking to Ann Gearan earlier on in the show, and she said the number one business should be voting on a budget. And Naftali Bennett has also already talked about the fact that the economy is the number one priority. What do you expect? What changes do you expect ahead?
Yeah, Yasmin, this is definitely a new day for Israel. This is going to inject oxygen into the body politic of Israeli society and really help the Israeli people grapple with significant challenges they've been facing. And to your point about the budget, because of the multiple elections over the past couple of years, Israel has not been able to pass a new budget to really fund the government at the levels that it needs. And this coalition, it reflects all of Israeli society, minus many of the religious parties who have dominated for the past dozen years. And it even includes an Israeli Arab political party, meaning that this party now has leveraged its political power into potential benefits from the Israeli government. So we're going to see a lot of action. We're going to see a lot of budget clearly going into sectors that have been been left behind for a number of years. And we're going to see a debate now in this new government from across the spectrum about issues of security, issues of internal tranquility, issues of the region, and where does Israel stand that we haven't quite heard coming from Israel in the last decade.
Okay, so what you didn't talk about was, of course, the 11-day conflict that Israel had with Gaza, subsequently followed by a ceasefire, right? What you didn't talk about was the settlements and how also Palestinians can feasibly be affected by this change in government. We knew that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was incredibly right-wing. We're now hearing Naftali Bennett is even more right-wing than Benjamin Netanyahu and doesn't want a two-state solution either. What happens to Palestinians under this new leadership?
Yeah, this is going to be the biggest test for this new government because it has left-wing parties in it, in addition to Naftali Bennett, who earlier in his career called for annexation of parts of the West Bank. And so for him, he's going to have to decide where does he sit and where does he take Israel. We've watched a history of Israeli leaders over time from the right-wing side of the camp and move to the center on peacemaking. Yitzhak Rabin, even Ariel Sharon, Menachem Begin decades ago. So the question now is, will Naftali Bennett, understanding that to keep his coalition, to keep power, he is going to have to work with the center and the center left. Is he going to make moves that alleviate the pressure on the Palestinian people, begin to re-engage again the Palestinian Authority as is necessary to keep calm and potentially to work with, not potentially, but to work with the United States on these efforts. And he'll have support from within his coalition. That's what Netanyahu didn't have, nor did Netanyahu try to cultivate. He had a right-wing base for his coalition, and he always kowtowed to the right wing for his policy decisions. Now Bennett has to move and look over to his center and to the left, and he'll have more space to make moves that Netanyahu neither had nor wanted to have.
Let's then talk about quickly the relationship with the United States. Will this allow for somewhat of a reset in the relationship with the United States, especially on the heels of 4 years of a Trump presidency who had a pretty close relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu, but somewhat strange, I should say?
Yeah, we just saw 4 years of Prime Minister Netanyahu and Donald Trump fused at the hip. And then before that, under Barack Obama, who I served under at the State Department, a lot of tension. And Joe Biden may be the luckiest president in recent memory in the United States when it comes to Israeli-American diplomacy, because he now has a new government sitting there in Jerusalem that is going to want to have a good relationship with the United States. It needs that in order to enable its agenda to go forward. And there are members of that government, the Defense Minister Benny Gantz, who was just here a week and a half or so ago, working with the Biden team on critical national security issues. So they're going to have to work closely. The Biden team has already sent out a positive statement about it. And Naftali Bennett, he understands that if he breaks this relationship or sees this relationship broken on his watch, the Israeli people will not support his staying in power either.
A lot happening, to say the least. Joel Rubin, thanks for jumping on with us. Appreciate it.